3-3. What?
What?
5-6.
I don't see it yet.
2-4. Is it this brick one?
No.
Was that it back there?
No.
Do you see a 5-6?
Not yet.
Where are the people's house numbers?
Well, behind them. This is 3355, so it's going to be this one.
The red thing?
Yep, I think. Yep, that's it.
This one right here.
Uh-huh. Gave them to Grandma that she always had, and Dad had them. So anyway.
Well, I wish the family would have kept the things from my father, because he brought over a tube about that long. He had
Direct from Oslo.
gone to Oslo and he saved up all of his money. Then he sold everything to come to the United States, his bicycle and everything. And his father says, well, I will not give you any money to buy your ship ticket. And so he says, that's okay, I've got enough money. I've saved all the money that you gave me, plus part of my wages, and I will sell all this. And so that's how he came to the United States. And of course, the name Bjornstad is the only one like it in the whole world, because they missed
BJ.
The J?
Well, they did the whole thing wrong, because I did a BI instead of BJ, and so we're the only ones that have that. So when I see Bjornstad on the internet, I know we're related, but who knows how. He came to Chicago, and when he was in Chicago, he started teaching the other people there, because he worked for a greenhouse. That's how he got sponsored. And he started teaching them English, and so they fired him. They didn't want the people to have the ability to know English.
Really?
Now, say that again. He worked in a greenhouse in Chicago?
Yeah, he was sponsored by that greenhouse.
Uh-huh.
And
they didn't want him to learn English.
They do not want them, because that makes them
Their employees.
Stable employees. They don't go elsewhere.
Oh.
Because they don't speak the language, so they don't know how to leave.
Yeah.
And so from there he went, as I understood, he went to Texas. And he was down there, and he became friends with a black man. The black man says, isn't Brown beautiful? And of course, Dad was Norwegian.
Yeah.
And but while he was there, they had a heat wave, and he watched a black man die on the sidewalk. He says, if a black man dies on the sidewalk, or a native down there dies on the sidewalk, what is a Norwegian doing down there? Because it was terribly, terribly hot. And so from there...
Didn't you mention that to me, that he was down in Texas for a while?
No, this was my grandpa.
That was your grandpa. Interesting.
What part?
I don't know.
Okay.
My dad, my mom's dad came twice to the U.S. And the first time he was apparently somewhere down in Texas, and he was all over the place. Then he went back, built a house for his parents. He'd known my grandma, back to Sweden, and he'd known my grandma, and so they got engaged. And he came back, and he was in one census in Spokane, but he ended up in Bend, which was he landed. And then,
well, from there, as I understand, he went to Baker City.
From Texas?
Yeah, he went to Baker City.
You know why? Well, I mean,
and
why
there? He had a chicken ranch. He raised chickens.
Really?
And
Huh.
I don't know why he left there, but he went down to the Columbia River to Svensson.
Where's
And
that?
Simpson?
Yeah, it was on the river. It's not very far from.
Not Stevenson.
No,
Svensson.
Svensson. It's down toward the coast, and it's
Past Portland?
little tiny town. I think it's still there.
Yeah.
And
On the Oregon side,
he
you
had
know?
a dray business there.
Oh, really?
With horses, he did haul all of the trucking stuff, and I think from there he went to Forest Grove, and there he worked for the Martins in their greenhouse, and that's how he met my mother.
Because that's where they were married, in Forest Grove, I saw.
That's where my mother, when her mother died, her father was declared
Unfit.
a very bad parent.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I
they took
remember.
all the children
So
and
they
they gave
spread
them.
it.
There
Yeah.
were no
They
other
spread
children.
out. Pardon?
She was raised by Uncle Ansel.
She was raised by an uncle who has been married before and had a child, and the child's name was Minnie.
Okay, you have to go
Okay.
slow because we have to get this. As far as I know,
Yeah.
Aunt May was my
Grandma.
who I called
Mom.
your mom, was raised by Uncle Ansel and Aunt Dora, and
Yeah.
they never had children.
No, they did not have children, but she had a child by a previous marriage.
Oh, Dora's child.
Mm.
And
That's not the same Minnie that was the first wife of the other.
no,
There was another brother who had a first wife, and then Virginia is the one who married him, and they raised
you
Ruth.
know more about that than
Well,
I
she's
do.
told me.
Yeah, well, I know nothing about
Oh,
my
but I wanna-
family.
yeah, but
I
I-
really don't.
Yeah.
I saw.
So Grandma went with Ansel.
Yeah, I saw Aunt Nell maybe 3 times,
What
Aunt
you
Nell?
saw? What?
and
Nell?
Uncle Bill maybe 3 times.
Yeah,
Aunt
really.
Nell and Uncle Bill maybe 3 times.
Pardon?
Aunt Nell, you said, was maybe 3 times?
Yeah, she was up at Hood River. She grew up in Hood River. And as
Huh.
I understand it, she was a very, very sickly child. And
Who is this now?
so they wouldn't let her outside.
Oh,
Nell
Minnie,
or Grandma?
Minnie.
Aunt Nell.
Aunt Nell
Oh, really?
was sickly.
Minnie became Minnie Lockwood. And they lived in 10 Mile.
Huh.
And they had the 10 Mile. Well, they had a logging outfit, and the family is still there. If Conrad is still living, and he's Conrad Lakey, and Phyllis, and those are her grandchildren. Anyway, back to Forest Grove. Mom was a very attractive young lady, and Dad liked what he saw, apparently.
We were saying that from the pictures. I think
Yeah.
Grandma was she was
She
she
was
was a
very
looker
pretty.
when she was young.
And so he was 32 and she was 18 when they got married.
We were noticing that too. He was quite
But
he
when-
was a cradle robber.
Yeah, what happened was, Mom says, well, you can only come 1 day a week or 2 times a week.
To call on
That's
her.
it, to call on her. He says, fine. So the rest of the time he came over in his slippers and very casual dress, and he came to see Papa,
So who was Papa?
her father.
Okay, so what?
It was actually her uncle, but he called
Ansel.
her Papa.
That'd be
Right.
Ansel.
Okay. So, because what I know is that Dora died in 1931.
And Mom took care of her.
Right. And then Ansel came up to Gresham. So Dora is buried in 10 Mile.
No.
She is. It's on Find a Grave. There's pictures of the
Is she
grave.
there?
Yeah, she was buried in 10 Mile.
Okay, I know that.
And then I
he's buried in Damascus.
He's buried up here. So I thought, well, he must have come up here to
Yeah.
be near me. So she wasn't even married when he came up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she was.
So why did
Yeah,
she come up to Forest Grove? How did to meet? That's where she met Tom,
But
Who
that's
are
where
we
Dad.
talking about?
Grandma. I'm
And
sorry.
Who's the male person? Her uncle.
Yeah.
That she
Aunt-
called
Uncle
Papa.
Ansel.
Ansel.
Yeah, Uncle Ansel.
Okay. Mom took care of both of them.
Right.
Yeah. But I didn't realize that she was buried in
Dora.
Coquille.
Yeah. So still though, how come they came up to Forest Grove? Because where did Ansel live when they split up all their kids?
Forest Grove.
Oh, that's okay.
Because I don't show it.
That's my understanding.
There's nothing on any like Ancestry or any of the places online that show they have any children at all.
No, they did not. The two of them had
Right.
no children.
Together, but she had one previous.
Yeah, she had one previous marriage.
But when you're saying all the kids, you mean all 2 kids.
No, she was talking about Grandma and Grandma. All
I'm
those
talking
kids were
about-
split up.
the
Oh, the
Her
5
siblings,
kids.
the
The 5
siblings.
kids.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
happened in 1900.
yeah.
Yeah. So when
My mom was 14 months old.
Right.
yeah, and when that happened, she went not immediately up to Forest Grove. She stayed down in
Right.
Coos Bay for a while.
She was raised in Coos Bay.
Grandma.
Up until her mother died, and they said he couldn't have the children. And then the
which
uncles
meant
all
her,
came in
which
and
meant
took the
he
children.
couldn't. No, I'm talking about Dora, the aunt and
Samson.
I know
uncle.
nothing about her except what I told you.
Okay, but when she died,
Dora died.
Dora died. That's Aunt Dora, who
Ansel's wife.
Ansel's wife, who
and
raised
31.
Raised my mother.
raised her, and so she died.
And she's buried in 10 Mile, so they must have still been
Right.
down there.
She's buried where?
10
in
Mile.
10 Mile.
Okay.
So they didn't come up
She
to
probably
Coos-
went down
to
there and
Rose.
stayed with
Right.
Minnie, her daughter.
Oh,
See, Minnie is Dora's daughter,
the one that
Right.
she had from
and
previous.
that was sister
Mm-hmm.
to Mom, and
Yeah.
and
Quote unquote.
they were very, very close, Minnie and Mom. Well, because Minnie was 10 years old when Mom came, and so that was her baby doll.
So Ansel and Dora were living in Forest Grove when the kids were distributed.
Yes.
No, oh, they were. Because I thought they were down in. The aunt and uncle that raised Aunt May were down around Coos Bay, and that they raised her down there.
And you know more than I. I don't remember Mom ever talking about it.
About why they went up to Forest Grove then? or
Yeah,
anything?
all
Okay.
I remember Mom talking about is Forest Grove.
Well, because okay, here's what I know that Grandma talked about.
Ruth.
Ruth. When their mother Sarah Church died, she asked her brothers to take care of her children because their father couldn't find work, and there's no
I
way
know.
he could deal with 5 kids.
No.
Couldn't do the cooking and the cleaning. He could barely do the working and the earning money. So at first, Bill went with one uncle, and Nell went with another one, and Alice and May and Ruth went with Uncle Ansel and Aunt Dora.
Ruth didn't go to Ansel, did she?
At first.
Oh, at first.
At first. They took Alice because Alice could help with May because Alice
Yes.
was almost 7. Grandma was 4, and she always said, well, Bill and Alice were old enough to be helpful around the place. May and Nell were young enough to come along like a baby. And she said, I was 4 years old, and I wasn't good for anything, and nobody wanted me. And so Dora couldn't handle all 3 of them. So my grandma, Ruth, went and lived with her grandmother, Ruth. And by the time...
Still down in
But she
Coos
lived
Bay
down,
area.
that was in Coquille.
Right. Well, yeah, or around there.
Yeah, because she lived, Grandma lived in Coquille, and I remember Aunt Ruth telling me that she got on the milk boat,
Yeah.
and she went down Coquille and came up the coast.
I'll get to that.
She's got
But
a
this
whole
is, I'm
story
still
for it.
here
Yeah,
in...
well, I'm still trying to decipher
Right.
who's where.
Okay.
Yes, me too.
This is 1900. So in 1900, when Sarah dies, Ruth, May, and Alice go with Ansel and Dora. Ansel is who Aunt May called Pops.
Yeah, Papa.
Papa. Okay. So that's where they were. And she was, 14 months old. It makes sense that she called her Papa, but they never changed any of the children's last names. They were never
She
adopted.
was he wanted to adopt her when she
Right.
was about 12 and or 13, somewhere in
Mhm.
there. And she says, no, I'll just get married and that will be changing my name and then changing it again. And so she did not change her name and become adopted. However, they treated her as though she was adopted.
Right.
And she became inheriting the same thing as Minnie.
Right.
Mm.
So anyway, so then what happened, then my grandma, Ruth, went and lived with her grandmother,
Yes.
whose name was also Ruth.
Yes.
And by the time the grandmother died in 1903,
Yeah.
then they sent Ruth back to live with May. But by then, Alice had gone to live with Uncle Tillo and Aunt Carrie,
Yeah.
who kept having lots of babies. So Alice was their nanny or helpful
Yes.
older sister. So Alice kind of always worked with taking care of the little kids. So when Grandma then didn't, their grandfather had died in 1902. So it's 1903 that Grandma Ruth Rice Culver dies. And so then my grandma goes back and lives with Uncle Ansel and Aunt Dora and May, who by then Grandma was 8, so May was about 3, going on 4.
Yeah, about.
Would have been little, really little. So anyway, Grandma was there from August of 1903, and then in June of 1904, that's when she goes on her trip.
Yeah.
Up the river.
Yeah.
To go live with Virginia
In Culver.
Yeah, Virginia and Oris.
Yeah.
In Culver.
I know that my mother always thought that Uncle Tillo was special.
Huh.
Well, we all heard the stories about Uncle Tillo.
I don't
Grandma,
remember any stories about
Oh
it.
my
I never
gosh.
heard any.
When Grandma B would talk,
Well, yeah. But I guess
she
we learned to tune her out, so we didn't
Oh.
listen. To she may have
So-
told us, but we didn't listen.
No, and I don't remember anything she said except that she talked a lot about Uncle Tillo, and usually
Really?
in a frustrated
Well,
tone
I
of
like
voice.
what Jim said. Jim says, I never met Uncle Tillo, but I don't like him.
Because Grandma didn't like him?
No, Grandma loved him.
Oh,
And that's
well.
all she'd talk about was Uncle Tillo.
Oh, okay.
Uncle Tillo this and Uncle Tillo that. And she says, I'm so tired of hearing about Uncle Tillo.
And I don't remember anything specific because we were pretty
Yeah.
He
young by
called
time
him
we
the
left.
little uncle.
The little uncle.
So I don't know what that means.
So you don't, but you know that she just doted on him for the most
Well,
part.
she talked a lot about
talked
it.
a lot about him.
Oh, yeah. She just recycled.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Now, 2 years ago, I met my
I've
sister.
got somebody at my door.
Okay.
I'm going to say something real quick here. So we know. Okay, by the way, this is Friday, April 12th, 2019, and I am Matt Norquist. We're in Eugene, Oregon, at the home of Rena Wilson, who is my mother's sister. Her maiden name is Bjornstad. And she has the deeper voice that you've been hearing. The little bit higher voice is my second cousin, Judy Barnes. And the other female voice here is my first cousin, Rena's daughter, Debbie Wilson. So, just so we all know where we're at here.
So anyway, the Janet and Wendell came from Albuquerque to Ashland, and we had a Monday off, and I was down there with Dory, my housemate. So we drove over to Coos Bay, and we went and saw Sarah's husband's grave in Coquille.
Oh,
That my dad and my uncle had put a gravestone on it. He'd just died as a pauper, and at some
Right.
point, and I never heard about this, but then there's a story there that says that they put the gravestone on there.
That's Alfred?
That's William Henry Church.
Okay, William Henry.
And he died in Coquille, and so he's in the Masons Cemetery there. It was really hard to find it. And then we also went up, and we went to the Pioneer Cemetery that's upriver and I have some maps and stuff that I can show you where they are. Anyway, we went there, and there's outlined by the height of one brick is the Collver family plot in this graveyard along the one of the branches of the river, Coos River, Coos River, I think. And Ruth Rice Culver and Sarah share an obelisk.
Oh, how
And
interesting.
it's that one's on one side and the other name's on the other side. They're both quite worn down now. And then
That's mother and
Uncle
daughter.
Tillo and Aunt Carrie are there in that thing, and Henrietta.
I
You know
don't know.
about Henrietta? I'll show you a
Who is
picture.
she?
She is the oldest of Alfred Bainbridge Culver and Ruth Rice Culver's children, who are all the aunts and uncles.
So that would have been
of your
Sarah's
mom.
sister,
Yeah.
grandma's
Okay.
mother's.
There's a
grandma's
picture
aunt.
of her sitting, and her feet are not touching the ground. She was like a dwarf, and they had another brother who was extremely short. I think that was Arthur, not Tillo, but Arthur. And
Yeah, if
So
anyone,
that's part why they called him the short uncle.
if anyone should have been called the short uncle, it would have been Arthur then.
but it wasn't. They called Tillo.
The
For
small,
sure,
the
little
short.
Yeah,
or
Uncle
something.
Tillo was called the short uncle.
But he wasn't the.
He
the
wasn't.
real
He
short-
wasn't the
short
shortest
short.
one. He wasn't the shortest one. There was one that was
Interesting.
almost classified as dwarfish.
Well,
Two children that were, and they had. This is interesting to me. Uncle Oris was married 3 times and never had any children, and Ansel never had children. So it's like,
That's interesting.
I think so.
Odd, yeah.
And I think also the really short uncle, he did marry, but he never had children. That of 7 brothers, 3 of them never were married and never had children. And it's just interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, anyway, we went to this graveyard, and a guy that has a dairy farm next door, he came over and asked if we'd had car trouble, and we said no. And he said, see over there, he says, that's the old, across the river, he says, that's the old Culver farm. He said, my uncle bought that place in the 1930s, probably
my.
after Tillo died. And he said, my uncle, he still has it. And he says, if you look, and I didn't have the eyes to be able to interpret what I was seeing, he says, but part of that is still the old house.
oh,
And I couldn't decipher through the distance what was the old house and what was an addition and everything. I
Yeah.
just couldn't figure that part out. But that old house is still there. And he says, it's still in my family. And he said, but he said, Tillo, I've looked up stuff online. Tillo was a very successful dairy farmer for the region. And
I wonder what he was
So
like.
anyway.
If Grandma liked him so much and everything. I wonder.
but
don't
and that
know.
also
You never-
is telling me that
was
she
he gone
was,
before you were around?
oh,
You never met him.
I know nothing.
Yeah.
but it tells me that
I never had a
think-
grandparent. They were all gone by the time I was
All of
born.
yous were.
Yeah,
Because
all
I,
my
only had- I
grandparents.
only had grandmothers, both. My
Yeah,
grandparents.
well,
Yeah.
I guess I have to ask Catherine if my grandfather came from Norway. I know the grandmother did a couple of times, but I don't know if the grandfather did.
Didn't I looked up? I thought we're talking about Tom's father. Tom, I think I looked up that he died. Was buried in Oslo.
Yeah, he is, but I don't
Oh,
know
you
if
think
he
maybe
made
he
a trip
came
over.
and he went back?
Because I know. Little sideline is I remember that Mom told me that when the grandma came over here, they were riding the train, Dad and Grandma, and she was speaking Norwegian and he was speaking English. My father wasn't stubborn.
Yeah, yeah. There's
And,
a streak in that family.
And Norwegians are a little bit
Ken very
firm
much.
of mind.
Yes. So,
Firm
but they
of
were,
mind.
but they both understood each other.
Oh yeah, my grandmother spoke 7 languages fluently.
Oh my God, this is Tom's mother.
Yes,
And how many
she was highly intelligent.
how many
Wow.
languages did your father speak?
Probably 5, maybe
Really?
6.
I didn't know that.
Well, because he spoke Swedish and German and Norwegian and English, and I think he had a smattering of French, and he could speak and understand Swiss.
Wow.
Oh, he was a highly intelligent man.
Wow.
Faye, Ken's wife, said he was the most intelligent man she'd ever met.
Man.
Well, he would read 2 daily newspapers, one weekly, and he had the Saturday Evening Post, the Country Gentleman, Lifetime, a couple of periodicals for the business, and he would read them every month, cover to cover.
Yeah.
Now, you probably remember Grandma B's house.
Yeah.
And she did a lot of reading too.
Yeah.
And she didn't throw anything away.
No,
so
she did not.
there were stacks. I remember walking through her house one time, and there were literally stacks on the floor, tall stacks of magazines.
And she
National Geographics is one that stands out.
My
in my
grandma
mind.
was a national. I just remember hearing about at me stacks of cottage cheese containers.
Cottage cheese container.
We inherited it from our ancestors.
I don't keep cottage cheese
Genetic
containers
trait?
anymore. Yeah.
Well, I
We
remember
are
Mom
carton
going over there
collectors.
once a year.
Yeah,
And we had to
yeah.
come
Come
with.
by it.
And Mom, I mean,
No.
obviously I hated it.
I have some,
because we had to
but
look
there's
like we were
that,
busy.
and
If
now-
it's a cute box, I've got to say.
And Mom would be out there
Oh.
mowing the lawn, and she'd be hauling stuff out, and it's like,
And
Well, and she'd go through and try to clean out the pantry, and there would be things in the pantry that were obviously
That were walking.
bad.
bulging cans.
that were walking around.
Yeah, and
Well-
Grandma B wouldn't let her throw it away.
Oh.
Even though it was inedible, she
Yeah.
would
What I
not
would
let Mom
do
throw it
is
away.
I would set my mother in the rocking chair in the doorway to the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I had 3 bags. I had 3 bags in the dining room too. I said, okay, this bag is definitely throw away. It's trash, it's ugly. This one is maybe. We'll think about it. And this one we'll keep. And so when I cleaned out the refrigerator, I had eggs that I opened one time, and I smashed open an egg and it went poof.
Oh,
So I said, that's definitely going, Mom. And I found a can of tuna that was so outdated, so I told her, you have got to put dates on your stuff and be sure and put the new in front and the old behind.
Mm-hmm.
Did
And so-
she ever do that?
Yeah, she did.
Oh, that's good.
The
And,
old in front, the new behind.
She would take care of people. Kindness was very high on the schedule of life.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be kind. And so she had someone who had lived in the apartment house, and they were living in their car and they didn't have any food or anything. So she went to her pantry and she filled a grocery bag with food. Well, I came back 2 or 3 times, and finally Mom says, I just can't give you any more. I have no more to give.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she would be very kind to people.
so they met in Forest Grove, and she eventually decided that she would marry
And they
him.
were married, and she was wearing a wine-colored suit, and her bouquet was garden roses and ocean spray. And you see that along the coast a lot.
Mhm.
You see the ocean spray. And I don't know anything more. I know that they lived in Portland, and Bob was born in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
And then they bought the home place on Hogan Road when Bob was probably a year or 2 old. So if they still own that place, if it's still in the Bjornstad name, that piece of land has been in the Bjornstad name for over 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the
On Hogan, where Mom was
On
What
born.
is
Hogan
that?
Where
Road.
Persimmon is now.
I don't know. Is that
That's where they were all
is that
raised.
where you were raised?
Yeah.
Yeah, on Hogan Road.
Mom was
Is
born
it
there.
still held?
Well, you
by
were
him?
too, I'm sure.
By
Well, they
Bjornstad?
sold off the greenhouse portion to,
Jim and Marquita lived there.
yeah, and Jim Marquita
Forever.
still owned that. I don't know what they're doing with that.
It's still a nursery. It was bought.
Oh, that's different.
The
That's
house. Do you
separate.
know if
That's
they
sold.
sold the home?
Oh, you're
The
talking
brick
about
house.
the brick house. You don't know what's going on with it. Yeah, I don't know either.
Dan is the one who's taking care of that.
Yeah.
And the reason they could split it off was because the home place had its own well. Good water.
Mhm.
It was hard water, but it was good water. And then the upper house had its own well too.
Oh.
And so that's how come legally they could sell that off.
Hmm.
And Mom, when Jim bought that from Mom told them that someday that they could do that, and that would help with their children or whatever they needed. They could, you know, do whatever they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so Joe lived in the home house until they bought their own home, and then they sold that to I can't think of the name of the nursery. It's in, there's a town up just this way from Selma, starts with a W. Anyway, there's a nursery there, and they bought it, and then he still worked for them, and he, as far as I know, he still does.
Now, who's Joe?
Jim and
Youngest
Marquitas.
of Jim Marquitas.
Okay.
Well,
I
yeah,
can't
that's
track.
not
I
him.
can't
Yeah.
track all of your nephews and
Yeah.
nieces.
Well,
Jim and Marquitas.
Jim and Marquitas,
Okay.
they're the ones who bought the place for
Mhm.
Mom. When Dad died, we lived with them with Jim. He was 22 when he came out of the service in 1946.
Mm-hmm.
And our father died in December of 1946.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to bury his father.
Mm-hmm.
On the day that Mom and Dad were supposed to get married.
Yeah, and so they
They
had to
delayed it
postpone
to
their
New Year's
marriage
Day.
and get married in January in Erickson's house.
Yep. Down by the old brick
So then
place.
you lived with Jim and Marquita.
No,
No.
they weren't married. I
Oh,
lived
they
with
weren't
Jim until he
Mm.
got married when he was 26.
Oh, they were married later.
So
They married later. He was older.
so
Yeah, he was
you
older.
and your mom lived with Jim.
I lived with Jim, my mother,
In the old
Catherine,
house.
and John,
Oh,
and briefly with Dottie until she got married.
right, which wasn't very long.
No. And then
When did they build the brick house? Right after they got married? Jim
no.
and Marquita?
Oh no!
It was
Oh
long
no!
time.
Much later.
It looks like the 50s. Had to be
Mhm.
late 50s maybe.
Let me think a minute here.
Oh, I remember.
I was 15 when I moved to Gresham. And it was after that they built the brick house.
Okay.
So I would say it was probably the 60s.
Must be early 60s because I
Yeah,
remember it was
early 60s.
Christmas Eve. In fact, I think I might still have the movie on this
Mhm.
computer that Dan gave me that somebody took with a film
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
of one of those Christmas Eves.
So
Yeah.
tell me.
It's got
when-
you and Dick and I don't know if it's Holly or Melanie.
I remember a couple of Christmas Eves.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're talking about the Hogan Road, I'm picturing